There is a particular kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. You walk into a room and immediately notice who noticed you. You post something, then check who reacted. Someone becomes distant, and your mind begins constructing explanations. A criticism lands, and long after the conversation ends, you are still defending yourself against words spoken by someone who has already forgotten them. You are not simply seeking attention. You are renting your sense of worth from other people. Schopenhauer saw this hunger for external approval as one of the great traps of human life. In his essays on the wisdom of life, he argued that a person's happiness depends far more upon what they are inwardly than upon possessions, reputation, or the opinions of others. Yet human beings repeatedly reverse this order. They sacrifice their inner life to maintain an image before an audience. And this is where the danger begins. Because once your emotional stability depends upon approval, whoever controls your approval controls you. A rejection can command your mood. A compliment can purchase your loyalty. Silence can terrify you. Criticism can make you betray your own judgment. But Schopenhauer's warning goes deeper than simply telling you to stop caring what people think. There is a final step, far darker and far more liberating, where you discover why you became so dependent on their judgment in the first place. And when you see it, you may never look at your need for approval the same way again. Arthur Schopenhauer was not a philosopher who built his ideas from the comfort of a peaceful life. He was born in 1788 into a wealthy German family, but wealth did not give him what he wanted most. His relationship with his mother was difficult. His academic career never unfolded as he expected. For years, his philosophical work received little attention while the intellectual world celebrated other thinkers. And Schopenhauer noticed something bitter about recognition. The world did not necessarily reward the person who saw most clearly. It often rewarded the person who was most visible, most fashionable, or most compatible with the opinions of the crowd. His hostility toward intellectual fashion was partly personal, but his deeper argument was philosophical. Human beings, he believed, are driven by a restless underlying will. We desire, pursue, achieve, and then discover that satisfaction does not last. Another desire appears. Another comparison begins. Another object becomes necessary. Approval fits perfectly into this machinery. You receive praise. For a moment, you feel elevated. Then the feeling fades. So you need more. Schopenhauer developed these ideas most famously in The World as Will and Representation, published in 1818, and later made them more accessible in his essays on practical wisdom. His philosophy was deeply pessimistic about ordinary human striving, but it was not merely a celebration of despair. He also explored ways of reducing the power that endless desire has over us. One of his most relevant observations concerned the difference between external possessions and inner constitution. In his view, what a person possesses, what a person represents in society, and what a person actually is are fundamentally different things. Yet people constantly confuse them. That confusion has become even more powerful in the modern age. Schopenhauer lived among salons, universities, books, newspapers, and social reputations. We live inside a machine that can measure attention by the second. Followers, likes, views, messages, status, public approval. The audience is no longer confined to a room. It can follow you into your bedroom. And Schopenhauer's warning becomes strangely modern. If your happiness depends primarily on circumstances outside yourself, you have surrendered the foundation of your happiness to forces you cannot command. But there is something even more disturbing. The person who desperately wants to be admired may believe he is pursuing strength, while secretly revealing that his emotional state belongs to everyone except himself. So the question becomes unavoidable. Why does another person's opinion possess such extraordinary power over you? To answer that, we have to descend beneath approval itself, into the mechanism that makes you crave it. The first mistake is assuming that approval is about praise. It is not. Approval is about permission. When someone approves of you, you experience a subtle confirmation. I am acceptable. I belong. I have not fallen outside the boundaries of what this person considers valuable. And when approval disappears, something deeper is threatened. Your image of yourself. Schopenhauer's philosophy gives us a powerful way to understand this. He distinguished between the external conditions of life and the inner constitution of the individual. Wealth, reputation, possessions, and social position may influence circumstances, but they cannot substitute for the quality of the person who possesses them. Imagine a man standing beside a magnificent house. The house is beautiful, expensive, impressive. But the man inside is terrified that everyone will discover he feels insignificant. So he keeps improving the house. New furniture, new clothes, new achievements, new displays of success. Yet every improvement creates another question. Is it impressive enough? This is the approval trap. You are trying to repair an internal wound with external evidence. And external evidence has an unfortunate weakness. It expires. A compliment works like a painkiller. It can quiet the discomfort, but it does not remove the source of the pain. Someone tells you that you are intelligent, attractive, successful, powerful, desirable. For a moment, you feel secure. Then someone else disagrees. And suddenly, the entire structure begins shaking. So ask yourself something uncomfortable. If nobody could see your achievements, would you still want them? If nobody knew how much money you made, how attractive your partner was, how respected your profession was, how many people followed you, or how impressive your lifestyle looked, what would remain? That question cuts directly through the performance. Because a man who needs witnesses for everything he does is not entirely living his own life. He is performing it. Schopenhauer repeatedly returned to the idea that a person's inner nature matters more than external possessions. In his essays on life wisdom, he argued that what a person is in himself contributes more fundamentally to happiness than what he owns or how others evaluate him. This changes the meaning of strength. Strength is not becoming indifferent because you have convinced yourself that nobody matters. It is becoming sufficiently grounded that other people's reactions no longer dictate your identity. Think of a tree. A weak tree does not become strong by painting its branches to look impressive. It becomes strong underground. Roots, depth, resistance. The storm reveals what the surface was hiding. Human beings are similar. A man can appear confident while being psychologically dependent on the smallest social signals. He can speak loudly while constantly monitoring the room. He can dress like a king while privately begging strangers to confirm that he matters. And this is where approval becomes dangerous. Because once your identity depends on an audience, you begin changing yourself according to the audience. You laugh at jokes you do not find funny. You accept disrespect because confrontation might cost you affection. You abandon an opinion because disagreement might make you unpopular. You remain in relationships that diminish you because loneliness seems worse than humiliation. You say yes when everything inside you is saying no. At that point, approval is no longer making you feel good. It is governing your behavior. So ask yourself again, how many decisions in your life would change if you knew nobody would applaud you for making them? That question becomes especially important when rejection enters the picture. Because praise gives the approval seeker pleasure. Rejection gives him pain. And the person who cannot tolerate pain becomes extraordinarily easy to control. Consider two men receiving the same message from someone they desire. I don't want to be with you. The first man experiences disappointment. He may grieve. He may wonder what went wrong, but eventually he accepts the person's decision and continues living. The second man begins negotiating with reality. What did I do? What should I change? Should I message again? Should I become colder? Should I make her jealous? Should I prove my value? He is no longer simply experiencing rejection. He is trying to reverse a verdict. That distinction matters, because rejection does not necessarily tell you what you are worth. It tells you what another person wants, prefers, feels, or chooses. But the approval-dependent mind converts a person's preference into a judgment of personal value. One woman does not desire you, and suddenly you conclude that you are undesirable. One employer rejects you, and you conclude that you are incompetent. One friend ignores you, and you conclude that you are unimportant. One audience dislikes your work, and you conclude that your work has no value. The event is small. The interpretation becomes enormous. And Schopenhauer's framework exposes the hidden engine beneath it. The more your happiness depends on external conditions, the more vulnerable your happiness becomes. You have effectively placed your emotional thermostat in someone else's hands. But there is another layer. Sometimes approval-seeking disguises itself as control. A man may say he wants everyone to respect him, but what he really wants is to control how everyone perceives him. He wants no criticism, no rejection, no misunderstanding, no embarrassment, no one seeing weakness. He wants to become psychologically invulnerable by controlling the audience. That is impossible. Human beings are not programmable. Someone will misunderstand you. Someone will dislike you. Someone will underestimate you. Someone will leave. Someone will criticize what you built. And if your identity requires universal approval, every one of these events becomes a small psychological death. This is why Schopenhauer's emphasis on inner independence matters. You cannot command the world's opinion. You can only cultivate the part of yourself that does not collapse when the world's opinion changes. Now look at your own life. Not the version you display. The private version. Who are you trying to impress? Whose rejection still occupies your mind? Whose approval can make you abandon your judgment? Whose silence can ruin your entire day? That person may possess more power over you than you realize. And the most frightening part is that they may never have asked for that power. You gave it to them. If this exploration is revealing something uncomfortable but useful, stay with it. Subscribe if you want more philosophical investigations like this, and leave a like so this conversation can reach someone who may need to hear it. Because the next step is where Schopenhauer's ideas become practical, and where weakness begins to look very different from what we usually imagine. The question is no longer whether you seek approval. Everyone does to some degree. The real question is this: what are you willing to sacrifice to obtain it? Your honesty, your dignity, your judgment, your freedom. Because that is where the invisible transaction becomes visible. You receive approval, and in exchange, you surrender a piece of yourself. But there is a way to reverse that transaction. And it begins with learning how to survive the moment when someone looks at you and does not approve. Rejection is where the philosophy leaves the library and enters your bloodstream. It is easy to say that you do not care what people think when everyone is praising you. It is different when the person you wanted chooses someone else. When your message is ignored. When your work is criticized. When a friend stops inviting you. When you walk into a room and realize that nobody is impressed. That is where your philosophy is tested. Schopenhauer understood that human beings are deeply affected by what happens outside themselves, but his practical philosophy repeatedly points toward a different source of stability: the cultivation of one's own inner resources, rather than making happiness dependent upon possessions, circumstances, or public judgment. This does not mean becoming emotionless. It means refusing to make another person's reaction the final authority on your worth. Imagine rejection as a door closing. The approval-seeking man stares at the door. He knocks again. He explains himself. He changes his clothes. He changes his personality. He promises to become whatever the person behind the door wants. Why? Because he believes the closed door has revealed something about him. But perhaps it has revealed something else entirely. Perhaps the person behind the door simply does not want to open it. That distinction can save years of humiliation. You do not have to turn every rejection into a verdict about yourself. Sometimes rejection is information. Sometimes it is incompatibility. Sometimes it is bad timing. Sometimes it is another person's preference. And sometimes, yes, rejection reveals a genuine weakness that deserves correction. The mature response is not to automatically blame yourself or automatically blame the other person. It is to examine the event without surrendering your identity to it. That is a very different psychological posture. Weakness begins when examination becomes begging. You stop asking, "What can I learn?" and start asking, "What must I become so they will accept me?" The first question produces growth. The second produces performance. And performance is exhausting because it requires constant surveillance. You begin watching yourself from the outside. How am I standing? Did that sound confident? Did they laugh? Was that message too eager? Did I look nervous? Do they respect me? Do they think I'm successful? You are physically present, but psychologically you have become your own audience. This is one of the strangest forms of self-consciousness. You are no longer simply living. You are watching yourself live. And because you are constantly watching, you cannot fully inhabit the moment. A conversation becomes an examination. A date becomes an audition. A job becomes a referendum on your intelligence. A disagreement becomes a threat to your identity. Even success becomes dangerous because success raises the stakes. Once people admire an image, you become terrified of behaving in a way that might destroy it. So you begin protecting the image instead of developing the person. Schopenhauer's distinction between what a person is and what a person has becomes especially useful here. External status can be acquired, displayed, lost, and compared. Inner character is a different matter. You can lose money and remain capable. You can lose status and remain intelligent. You can lose an audience and continue creating. You can lose someone's affection and remain worthy of affection. But if you build your identity entirely around the external symbol, then losing the symbol feels like losing yourself. That is why some people become strangely aggressive when their status is questioned. Watch what happens when someone challenges a man whose identity depends on appearing powerful. He may become defensive. He may exaggerate. He may insult. He may suddenly need everyone to know what he owns, who he knows, what he has accomplished. The aggression is often an attempt to protect an unstable identity. Real confidence does not require constant announcements. A mountain does not become taller because someone calls it tall. And it does not become shorter because someone insults it. This is the social dynamics dimension that approval seekers often misunderstand. People do not merely respond to what you say. They respond to the psychological position from which you say it. A person who desperately needs approval communicates need even when the words sound confident. The excessive explanation, the nervous laughter, the immediate agreement, the inability to tolerate silence, the desperate attempt to repair someone's disappointment. These signals can tell other people that their reaction has unusual power over you. And once that becomes apparent, the relationship changes. Not necessarily because everyone is malicious. Human beings simply respond to patterns. If you repeatedly abandon your boundaries whenever someone becomes displeased, people learn that displeasure works. If you constantly apologize for having reasonable needs, people learn that pressure works. If you threaten to leave but never leave, people learn that your threats are empty. If you cannot tolerate being disliked, people learn that disagreement can control you. This is why approval seeking can quietly create the very disrespected fears. You want people to respect you, so you become agreeable. They become accustomed to your agreement. You fear losing them, so you tolerate behavior you would never advise another person to tolerate. They become accustomed to your tolerance. You want to appear easygoing, so you suppress your preferences. Eventually, nobody knows what you actually want. And then you wonder why nobody treats you like a person with weight. The problem was not kindness. The problem was self-erasure. There is a difference between being considerate and being governed. A strong person can listen without obeying. He can accept criticism without collapsing. He can apologize without becoming submissive. He can change his mind without feeling humiliated. He can say no without needing to manufacture hatred for the person hearing it. And perhaps most importantly, he can be misunderstood without immediately launching a campaign to correct everyone's perception of him. That last one is difficult, because modern life gives you unprecedented opportunities to manage your image. You can edit the photograph, delete the post, rewrite the message, curate the profile, hide the failure, display the achievement, present yourself as permanently successful. But the more carefully you manufacture the image, the more frightening authenticity becomes. Because eventually you have to ask, if the audience disappeared, who would remain? This is the mirror moment. Do not answer it with the version of yourself you want to be. Answer it with your actual life. Look at the decisions you made during the last year. Which ones were genuinely yours? Which were designed to impress? Which relationships did you maintain because you valued the person? And which did you maintain because you feared being alone? Which ambitions came from your own judgment, and which were borrowed from people you wanted to impress? Which possessions did you actually want, and which did you want because they communicated status? Which opinions do you defend because you have examined them, and which do you defend because changing them would make you look weak? And perhaps the hardest question, how much of your personality exists because it works? Not because it is authentic, because it gets approval. This is where Schopenhauer's philosophy becomes psychologically uncomfortable. He argued that human beings are not as rationally self-directed as they often imagine. Beneath conscious reasoning lies a powerful striving that continually pushes us toward desire and dissatisfaction. So your approval seeking may not feel like a conscious decision. It may feel like instinct. You see someone succeed. You compare. You feel deficient. You pursue. You receive recognition. You feel relief. The relief fades. You compare again. The cycle begins again. It resembles a treadmill. The faster you run, the more convinced you become that you must keep running. And social media has transformed that treadmill into an infinite corridor. There is always someone richer, someone younger, someone more attractive, someone more successful, someone with more followers, someone traveling somewhere you have never been, someone receiving the attention you secretly wanted. If you measure yourself through comparison, there is no finish line. Even victory can become another form of slavery. You achieve something. Then you discover someone who achieved more. You become attractive. Then you encounter someone more attractive. You make money. Then your reference group changes. You become respected. Then you become terrified of losing respect. The goal moves because the measuring instrument is external. This is why inner independence is not the same as laziness. It does not mean abandoning ambition. It means separating ambition from desperation. You can pursue excellence without needing applause. You can build wealth without requiring everyone to admire you. You can become physically strong without making your body a plea for recognition. You can become intelligent without turning every conversation into a demonstration. You can love someone without making their affection the foundation of your identity. That is a completely different kind of strength, and it changes how you enter a room. You stop asking, "How am I being received?" You start asking, "What is actually happening here?" You listen more carefully. You speak more deliberately. You stop filling every silence. You become less reactive. You can disagree without turning disagreement into war. You can leave without theatricality when a relationship consistently violates what you consider necessary for your dignity. People may notice the change. Some will like it. Some will not. And that is precisely the point. If becoming more internally independent causes certain people to lose interest in you, you have learned something important about the relationship. You are not necessarily losing connection. You may have been losing the version of yourself that existed to maintain it. That distinction hurts, but it can also feel like breathing after spending years underwater. Because the ultimate danger was never that people might disapprove of you. The danger was that you might become so desperate for their approval that you eventually forget how to approve of your own life. And once you understand that, the next question becomes brutally practical. What do you actually do when the craving for approval returns tomorrow morning? Because it will return. And philosophy that cannot survive an ordinary Tuesday is only decoration. When the craving for approval returns, do not try to destroy it. Watch it. That is the first rule. You will still want praise. You will still notice rejection. You will still feel the sting when someone dismisses you. The goal is not to become a stone. The goal is to stop obeying every emotion simply because you experience it. When you feel the urge to impress someone, pause before acting. Ask yourself, would I still do this if nobody knew? If the answer is no, examine the motive. Perhaps you genuinely want the achievement. Perhaps you want the attention attached to it. Those are not the same thing. Do not confuse ambition with exhibition. Build things that remain valuable when nobody is watching. Read without announcing what you are reading. Exercise without needing to display your transformation. Develop a skill without immediately seeking recognition for it. Keep some victories private. There is psychological power in having parts of your life that exist without an audience. The second rule is simple. Do not negotiate with rejection. If someone says no, hear the no. Do not immediately turn it into a puzzle that must be solved. You can learn from rejection without begging rejection to reverse itself. Ask what the experience can teach you. Then accept the answer and continue. The third rule is more demanding. Never trade your judgment for temporary approval. If you believe something is wrong, do not pretend it is right merely because disagreement makes you uncomfortable. If you need to say no without constructing an elaborate excuse. If someone becomes angry because you established a reasonable boundary, allow them to experience their anger. Their emotional reaction is not automatically your responsibility. You can be compassionate without becoming controllable. The fourth rule is this: stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. There are moments when clarification is necessary, but endless explanation often reveals something else. You are trying to force another person to give you a favorable interpretation. That is impossible. People are allowed to misunderstand you. Your reputation is not a possession you can completely control. Schopenhauer's philosophy repeatedly directs attention away from external opinion and toward the substance of one's own existence. Your task is not to construct an image so flawless that nobody can criticize it. Your task is to become someone whose life does not depend upon the criticism stopping. The fifth rule: do not make comparison your measuring instrument. There will always be someone ahead of you in one dimension. Someone richer, stronger, more attractive, more celebrated, more intelligent, more connected. If your sense of worth depends on winning every comparison, you have accepted a game designed to produce permanent dissatisfaction. Measure yourself against your own standards, not the crowd's appetite, not the algorithm's appetite, not the expectations of people who do not have to live with the consequences of your choices. The sixth rule is perhaps the most important. Learn to tolerate being disliked. Do not deliberately make people dislike you. Do not confuse arrogance with independence, but understand that a meaningful life requires choices that someone will inevitably dislike. Every boundary excludes something. Every commitment requires saying no to alternatives. Every genuine conviction creates the possibility of disagreement. If you need universal approval, you cannot live decisively. You will become a collection of compromises, and eventually you will discover something frightening. Everyone likes a different version of you. The agreeable version, the successful version, the quiet version, the entertaining version, the useful version, the obedient version. Trying to satisfy them all will leave you with no stable center. So choose your principles carefully. Then let your behavior emerge from them. The seventh rule: protect your solitude, not isolation. Solitude. There is a difference. Isolation is hiding because you fear judgment. Solitude is stepping away from judgment long enough to hear your own mind. Schopenhauer placed considerable value on independence of mind and warned, in his discussions of practical wisdom, against allowing society's judgments to become the measure of one's existence. Spend enough time alone to discover which desires are actually yours. Some ambitions become strangely quiet when nobody is watching. Some relationships become obviously hollow when you stop fearing loneliness. Some goals lose their glamour when you remove the possibility of applause. That silence is valuable. Do not rush to fill it. And finally, do not seek to become a man who needs nobody. Seek to become a man who can love people without needing them to define him. That distinction changes everything. You can want affection without begging for it. You can enjoy admiration without depending upon it. You can accept correction without humiliation. You can experience rejection without turning it into self-hatred. You can pursue excellence without making your achievements a public plea for worth. This is not emotional detachment. It is proportion. Give external things the amount of power they deserve. No more. Because once you stop demanding that the world constantly confirm your value, something unexpected happens. You become available to reality. You can finally see people as they are, instead of constantly asking what they think of you. You can work because the work matters. You can love because you genuinely love. You can walk away because staying would betray your judgment. And perhaps for the first time, your life begins to feel like something you inhabit rather than something you perform. But there is still one final question. If approval was never the prize you thought it was, then what exactly have you been chasing all this time? That is where Schopenhauer's warning reaches its deepest point. Perhaps the dangerous secret was never that other people control you. It was that you taught yourself to need their permission. You confused admiration with worth. You confused being wanted with being valuable. You confused being agreed with being right. And slowly, almost invisibly, you began constructing a life around the avoidance of disapproval. Schopenhauer's warning points somewhere deeper than the simple command to stop caring what people think. His philosophy suggests that external circumstances and social recognition cannot provide the stable foundation for happiness that people expect them to provide. What you are inwardly matters more than the image you successfully project outwardly. That changes the question. You no longer ask, "How can I make them approve of me?" You ask, "What kind of person would I be if approval were irrelevant?" Imagine waking tomorrow with no audience, no one to impress, no reputation to defend, no stranger to envy, no critic to defeat, no admirer to satisfy. What would you pursue? Who would you call? What would you stop pretending to enjoy? What would you finally say? And what would you have the courage to walk away from? That is the final test. Because strength is not the absence of rejection. Strength is discovering that rejection cannot purchase your identity. Someone may misunderstand you. Let them. Someone may dislike you. Survive it. Someone may leave. Grieve, then continue. Someone may refuse to recognize your value. Do not hand them the authority to determine it. The man who needs applause must constantly perform. The man who has developed an inner standard can finally live. So here is the philosophical challenge. If everyone whose approval you currently seek disappeared from your life tomorrow, what parts of your identity would remain? And would you respect the person who remained? Do not answer quickly. Sit with it, because your answer may reveal whether you are living from conviction or performing for an audience that was never supposed to own you.